Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Kendra and this video is going to be all about what I made in the third quarter of 2024. Starting with finished objects. So the first project I finished in Q3 was the Skyline tee by Tori Yu. It is a fingering weight, top down, saddle shoulder t-shirt with short sleeves. It was my first time doing a saddle shoulder and I really enjoyed the process, and I think it's a unique construction that I hadn't experienced before. And the yarn I used is Ancient Arts Fiber Studio Socknado and the color Davy Jones Locker, which is a rich teal color. It is a hand-dyed yarn. This is the first garment that I ever knit with hand-dyed yarn, and I had my reservations. It turned out better than I was anticipating, and I refused to alternate skeins. So all things considered, this was a successful turnout because I feel like it could have gone a lot worse. By the way, if you want specs on gauge and size and the yardage I used, click the link below to my Ravelry profile because all of that is documented in my individual Ravelry projects. So I won't be getting too technical about the projects that I mentioned in this video. So if you want more details, you can start there. And if you don't find it on my Ravelry project page, you can ask me in a comment below or send me, you know how to reach me. It's all in the description box. I like how this turned out. It's better than I expected, but to be quite honest, since completing it, I haven't really worn it. I find it difficult to incorporate into my wardrobe, and I think one reason is I don't like the variation in color. I think it would be easy to blame it on my decision not to alternate skeins, but I think even if I had alternated skeins and it evened out the color even a little bit, I still really don't like the variation in the color. I really would have preferred this to be a solid color. And I think the other thing I don't love about this project is that the color is too close to a lot of the pants that I wear. I primarily wear jeans in varying shades of blue, but the blue on blue is just, it's not something that I really enjoy. I think it works well with a couple of the white pants that I have. But even then, it's just something about it that I don't love. And I'm still trying to figure out what that is. But I'll give myself another season of wear for this piece, and then I'll determine if I want to do something else, either frog the yarn and knit it into something else or offer it for sale online somewhere. So we'll see what the future of my Skyline tee is, but for now, it's not looking too great. I definitely want to consider making another version of this pattern in a different color yarn and something in a solid color or maybe even a heather color. But yeah, this one is just okay. Moving on to the next project I finished in Q3. It is the Hill 60 hat by Galt House of Yarn. And the yarn I used here was the Cascade 220 in the color navy, I believe. Yeah, in the color navy. And it's actually leftover yarn from the knit swap that I did over the summer. Can't say enough great things about it. I loved how it turned out. And she also sent back the leftover yarn from that project. So I used some of it to make a hat. I was kind of in between projects and I needed something that was like a mindless cast on, and I wasn't really in the mood for socks, which is weird because I was heavy into the sock knitting for the first half of the year. And so far for the second half, I have not knit one sock, which is really interesting. But yeah, so this was a great project to just have on the go during my commute to and from the office a few times a week. And it was also a really instant gratification project because it knit up so quickly. I knit this pattern once before as a gift for my father-in-law. And this version, I didn't really knit for anyone in mind. It wasn't for me. It was kind of just a quick stash busting project that I kind of will have handy if I do need to gift something to someone. But it was a fun, quick project. In keeping with the hat themes, the next project I finished was a musselburgh hat. I made it for my husband. It's another great gift knit. This is now the third time I've knit this pattern. The first time was for my sister-in-law. The second time I made a version for myself. And now this third time I made for my husband. I use Kelburn Woolen's Perennial, which is, I think, a merino alpaca nylon sock yarn. It is fingering weight. I think I knit him the size adult medium. And yeah, there's really not a whole lot to say about it. It is a simple pattern, very simple concept and construction. I will say I genuinely dislike the cast on process for this project. So whenever I'm making a musselburgh, I have to kind of gear myself up for the cast on because it's just unpleasant to me. I've tried the pinhole cast on and I did not memorize it the first time I tried it. So the second two times I knit the musselburgh hat, I just did a long tail cast on for the number of stitches that you have to start with. And I just went from there, and then I used a tail to go back and close up the hole. And honestly, I don't think it makes much of a difference. And I just feel like I have limited capacity for the number of cast-ons and binds-offs that I commit to my memory. And the pinhole cast-on just didn't make the cut. And I was not interested in watching a tutorial or trying to go back and figure out how to do it. It just wasn't worth it to me. And honestly, I have no regrets. Next up, the project I finished was the Book Club cardigan by Sari Nordland. I believe the previous video on my channel was my project spotlight for this cardigan. I will not spend a lot of time talking about it because I could spend a ton of time talking about it. It was a huge success. I think it was my best knit of the year so far. I used Cascade 220 in the color Stratosphere, which is a really saturated royal cobalt blue color. And I had a blast knitting it. It was a great experience. And I learned a few things on this project, which I feel like happens less frequently these days. And yeah, just the project pictures and videos speak for themselves. So we don't have to spend too much time on this. If you want more details, check out that video and let's move on. All right, the next finished project is the Citrine by Emily Green. It's a seamed project. It is knit up from the bottom up in pieces and seamed together. It is a drop shoulder construction with this really cool twisted rib and eyelet detail along the shoulders and sides. And I've wanted to knit this pattern for a while and I'm finally getting around to doing it. So there's some lore with this project. The yarn I used is Walcott Yarns Origin and the color Sea Lion, which is like a darker gray color. This is yarn that I frogged from a previous finished object. So I think a couple years ago, I knitted into the leelanau sweater by, I can't remember the designer for that pattern. There was a leelanau knit along in this private group I'm a part of. They do it every year. And I figured, you know, now's the time. I'll give it a try. And I believe it was this was my second colorwork sweater. It was a bottom up raglan, which I didn't have a ton of experience with. And I made some mistakes in the project. The fit was okay, but I think the biggest thing I didn't like about it was the colors that I chose. I was going through that period of I don't want to buy yarn, but I really want to participate. So I picked two yarns from Stash, and the main color is like I said, the Walcott Yarns Origin that I got from Rhinebeck in 2022. During Rhinebeck weekend, I got it from Cake Palooza in 2022. And I had this thing in my head where every event I went to that weekend, I had to get at least one sweater quantity. Totally silly, would not recommend that mindset when you go to Fiber Festival, but that's the sweater quantity I picked up from Cake Palooza. And I struggled for a while to figure out what to do with it. And I figured, hey, I'm using Stash. This is worsted weight, might as well. I paired it with this dark red color. I can't remember what yarn, but it was a red color as the contrast color. And I know I was never really in love with the color combination, but I really did love that it was an opportunity to get a decent amount of yarn out of stash. And so that's why I forged ahead with that project. And in the end, I wore it maybe twice. And the sleeves were two different sizes. The sleeves were two different sizes. That was the biggest mistake I made. But yeah, I just didn't find myself reaching for it a lot. And the yarn was expensive and I put a lot of time into it. So I figured it would be worth kind of assessing what I can do to salvage it. And ultimately I decided to frog it and knit the project into a different sweater. And so that is how this citrine pullover came to be. And yeah, I'm really happy I did that. It was a bit extra work. I had to rip out the previous project, soak the yarn to get all the kinks out. And so there was more work up front than there normally would be for a sweater project, but I think it was worth it because the end result is something that I am happy to wear, that I think I'll reach for a lot more than I did the leelanau. And yeah, overall a successful journey. Although I like it and I'm glad I did this project, I'm not totally in love with it, and I don't think it's the pattern. I think it goes back to the color of the yarn. Although this sweater is a lot more wearable than the leelanau was, if I could turn back the hands of time, I think I would have chosen not to buy this yarn in the first place. So like I said, we knit and we learn. As far as the knitting process, I did do one modification. So I knit the front and back panels bottom up as instructed in the pattern, but I was playing a little bit of yarn chicken when it came to knitting the sleeves and the collar. So I decided to modify the sleeve construction by picking up stitches around the armhole and knitting the sleeves top down instead of casting on at the cuff and knitting them bottom up. And that allowed me to manage my yarn a little more strategically. And ultimately I was able to knit the sleeves. They turned out fine. I knit them to full length. They are a little bit tighter than I would have liked. For most patterns I knit, I modify the sleeve decreases or increases to give myself a little bit more room in my upper arm because I do have larger upper arms relative to my bust. But I didn't make that modification in this case, and I followed the decreases in the same cadence that the pattern wrote the increases for the bottom up sleeves. And it has resulted in a very tight sleeve. And I think part of that is the design. If I look at the sample pictures, Emily Green's version has very fitted sleeves with the oversized body. So I think it's the look, but I feel like it would be a little bit more comfortable if I had more room in my sleeves, but the sleeves still fit. So all in all, a success. I'll just give another PSA. If you have a finished object that you don't wear and don't reach for, don't be afraid to rip it out and knit the yarn into something new. I did it for my leelanau. I'm going to be doing it for another project. Highly recommend. It was totally worth the effort. Next up is a matching set. So for a while now, I've wanted to knit myself a matching set of winter accessories, and I kept putting it off and putting it off. You know, over the past 4 years of my knitting journey, I've knit a few mittens, many hats, and none of them match each other. So when I'm going out the door and I'm getting dressed for an outing in the winter, it always irked me a little bit that I would have a yellow hat and gray mittens and like a brown scarf. And it's like, what am I trying to do here? I wanted a little bit of cohesion with my winter accessories. And so I decided I would knit a matching set and that 2024 would be the year I finally do that. And I chose the Winter Essentials pattern by Suzanne Mueller. It is a very basic pattern. It includes a hat, a mitten, and a neck warmer. And all three pieces have this all over 2x2 rib texture. Like I said, very simple. And, you know, in retrospect, there are a few that I know of free 2x2 ribbed patterns. Pearl Soho has a matching set that includes mittens and a hat. And the Pearl Soho one is also a DK weight pattern, which is what the winter essentials set calls for. I think the selling point for me with this set was the neck warmer. Another very simple pattern. Honestly, I could have reverse engineered it and knit my own version without paying for the pattern, but sometimes you're just not in the mood to do that. I didn't want to figure it out on my own. I just wanted somebody to tell me what to do, and that's why I purchased the pattern. If it didn't include the neck warmer, I probably would not have purchased it at all. So do with that information what you will. I knit the mittens first, and really nothing special about them. I knit the mittens first. Love how they turned out. They fit well. I think they came in sizes and I made the largest size. And then second, I knit the neck warmer, which was the selling point for this pattern for me. And that, I believe, only comes in one size. And I didn't do any modifications. I knit it exactly as it was written. So the pattern does call for a tubular cast on and bind off for all of the edges. For the mittens, I just did a regular German twisted cast on. And for the neck warmer, I did go ahead and do a tubular cast on, which for 2x2 rib, you know, I have mixed feelings about it. I used to hate it, but now I can appreciate it for the aesthetic value that it offers. And I think it was worth the effort. I wish I would have put in that extra effort for the mittens, but my logic with that is that the mittens are most likely going to be hidden under the cuff of whatever coat I'm wearing, so they won't be as visible as the edges of the neck warmer. So I put in the extra effort for the neck warmer, and that's my reasoning. So my plan was to continue with the matching set and knit the hat as the third piece to tie it all together. But then I remembered I knit a 2x2 ribbed hat and a yarn that is almost identical to the yarn that I'm using, which, by the way, is Ashling Yarn's British DK. It is an undyed DK weight yarn. I got it at the Michigan Fiber Festival in 2023. So yeah, once I realized I basically had the exact hat I was going to knit, I had to pivot, and I figured I would knit something else, but still another winter accessory. And I ultimately decided to knit the Kilometre scarf by Florence Miller, which is the first whip that I have to share. Look at that smooth transition. So yeah, I decided to use the yarn that I had left, which was 2.5 full skeins. I started with 5. I used 1.5 for the mittens and the neck warmer. So that meant I have 3.5 left. 3.5 left, and I decided to cast on for the Kilometre scarf. So I should have enough yardage to knit to the length I want. Wait, let me tell you about the scarf. It's stockinette. It's really very simple. You cast on, I think, 100 stitches, and it is a free pattern, so I'm not giving away any paid information. You cast on 100 stitches, you knit a tube in the round for like 5 or 6 feet or something crazy, and then you sew up the bottom. So it is a tube, but it creates a flat scarf. Now, I did modify the cast on. I cannot remember what the cast on is called for, but I think it's the same cast on you would do for like a toe up sock. But like I said, I have a limited mental reserve for learning new cast ons and bind offs. So I just decided to do a provisional cast on for the number of stitches, and I'll go back and Kitchener that close in the end. And the cast on she calls for also requires you to knit the first few inches in magic loop until you get enough fabric to be able to knit straight in the round without magic loop, which is what I'm doing here. I was casting this on for a trip that I was taking to Toronto. I was going to be there for a week. It was the night before I left, and I had no whips. I needed something portable and something easy to cast on, and I wasn't interested in starting something with magic loop that I would then have to switch needles for. So I just modified the cast on so that it would be an easier knitting process for me. And yeah, that is going along quite smoothly. Tired of talking. Okay, so the next whip I have to share is a very simple one. It is kind of a musselburgh, kind of a knot. So I am casting on with the musselburgh instructions, and this is going to be a baby hat for a colleague of mine who's having their first baby. I have 3 people on my team currently expecting children, which is crazy. But this is going to be a newborn musselburgh hat, but instead of knitting the double layered, I am going to knit the crown and switch to smaller needles to do ribbing, probably a 1x1 rib and a tubular bind off for like a folded ribbed brim. And I'm using the yarn I have left over from my husband's musselburgh hat, so the Kelburn Woolens Perennial. And I can't remember how much I have left in grams, but this is what I'm working with. And part of the reason I decided to knit the hat this way is because I didn't know that I had quite enough to knit the full musselburgh hat with both layers, but also because laziness. So for now, this is my commute project. This comes with me on the train when I go to work. And last, but certainly not least, for my current works in progress, I have cast on my husband's sweater. I've mentioned the husband sweater saga a few times now, so I won't spend too much time talking about it, and I am going to make a project spotlight vloggy style video covering this project when I do have it complete. But I did cast it on last night. I am using, the pattern. The pattern is the Fantomas sweater by Wally One Knitting. It's a DK weight, bottom up, saddle shoulder, quarter zip sweater. I've never done a bottom up saddle shoulder, and I've never sewn in a zipper to a sweater. So I'm going to learn a couple of things with this project, which is really exciting. And I did cast on last night. I'm using Barocco Vintage DK and the color cast iron, which is a very dark gray that reads black in most lights, I would say. But yes, I cast on last night. I had to cast on well over 200 stitches and join in the round. I have not started a project like that in a long time. You might notice a lot of tails here because I cast on, when I'm casting on a lot of stitches using a long tail method, and I just pull from 2 different skeins of yarn so that I never run out for my long tail, because I'm notoriously bad at estimating tail lengths. And highly recommend that hack if you also have that problem. It does result in a couple more ends to weave, but for the peace of mind, it is totally worth it. And I'm still on the hem, so I'm using the smaller needles. And this is interesting because it calls for a 4x1 rib pattern for the hem, which is intriguing. I've never done a 4x1 rib for like the edging of a sweater. Stay tuned for how this turns out. I am optimistic. I took very detailed measurements of my husband. I knit 2 gauge swatches. I'm very confident going into this project, unlike my first attempt at knitting him a sweater. So I will report back with how this is going. Stash totals update. I did purchase some yarn over the past few months. I did destash quite a bit of yarn, so the ins and outs probably look crazy. Trust me, I do not knit at the speed of light. You saw what I made. I think that's a reasonable pace of knitting, but I did destash quite a few sweater quantities from my yarn stash, so that helped my numbers quite a bit. And I also will say I had some calculation errors in the previous versions that I shared, so bear that in mind. If you are paying super close attention, I'm sorry for that. So far as of September, year to date, I have used and destashed a total of 19,482 yards, and I have acquired a total of 16,696 yards. And that brings my net stash reduction for the year so far to 2,786 yards. You know, I was going to share a bit about my upcoming projects, but I'm tired of talking. So I guess you'll hear about those later. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.